You're listening to Dairy Voice by Dairy Business News, a podcast exclusively for the dairy industry.
One of our sponsors of the Dairy Voice podcast is National DHIA. NDHIA ensures information accuracy and represents their members' interests. They are the direct voice for the dairy information industry. To find out more, go to dhia.org.
Clean, high-quality forage doesn't happen by accident. It's built from the field up with research-proven Magniva forage inoculants from Lallemand Animal Nutrition. You can unlock clean, quality forage for your herd, every crop, every ton, every year. Magniva forage. Inoculants help drive efficient fermentation, reduce dry matter losses, and optimize feed value and intakes, so more of what you harvest turns into performance in the bunk, improved fermentation, improved stability, better use of your forage investment. Gain every advantage from field to feed with Magniva forage inoculants. Discover how Magniva can elevate your silage quality by visiting magniva.com. That's MAGNIVA.com.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you are in your day, welcome to the Dairy Voice podcast by Dairy Business News. I'm Connie Kuber. I'm your host today, and I'm with Sealpro Silage Barrier Films and Connor AgriScience. And today I've got a really very special experience for you. We're not going to talk about calves. We're not going to talk about milk fever. We're not going to talk about vaccinations or any of that kind of stuff. We're going to talk about something really, really way important, and that is personal growth, leadership, and knowing yourself a little better. So my guest today is Tyler Dickerhoof, and he is with Impact Driven Leadership, and he is going to give us some insight into what he's done. You might recognize him from his background in the dairy business, and I'm really excited to have him here on our podcast. He's got a lot of great things. So welcome, Tyler.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for this opportunity to speak into an industry that, quite honestly, made me.
Right.
There is not a part of me that I could extract out and have the dairy industry separated. Mm-hmm. And, from growing up on a small registered dairy farm in Ohio, being in 4-H FFA, judging, Dairy Bowl, all of those things, showing cows, to then getting into the dairy nutrition industry. That's how I got to know you and your husband, Ron, when I was in California. And then to this day, still owning cows. I have probably as many beef cows as I have dairy cows now because they're a whole lot easier to take care of. Let's just state that right now.
Right.
So if anyone is confused, the beef people, they got it easy. I mean, even more than the tree farmers in California. The beef guys, we're going there, right? But I had to learn the hard way. I had to learn that lesson. But man, I still appreciate, love my dairy cows. But cows, quite honestly, again, have made me. And here's a statement that in a lot of ways, cows taught me more about leadership that I never took time to really understand and learn until much, much later in life.
This episode is brought to you by DRMS. DRMS is excited to introduce Rapid Reports and Bovine Bio, two new tools within the Herd HQ platform. Rapid Reports gives you instant access to individual animal data from any web browser on any device. Use test day or DART sync data from your processed herd to build and customize reports, sort and filter results, create lists unique to your goals, and drill down to individual cow pages with Cow Compass. Bovine Bio brings flexible, user-defined views of individual cow and heifer data, allowing you to build pages around your priorities, from genetics and reproduction to health and performance, using intuitive drag-and-drop tools and custom alerts. Bovine Bio helps tell the full story of your animals anytime on any internet-connected device. Herd HQ. See what's happening in your herd. Learn more at drms.org/herdhq/what-is-herd HQ.
Tell me more about that.
I mean, I made this comment kind of jokingly as we're getting ready. I said, hey, I'll be a good little heifer and go wherever you want me.
You did.
And here's the reality of that. I grew up showing cows. I remember my first heifer. And I was trying to break her to lead, and we're going down the driveway on the backside of our farm, and she decides to take off, and I hold on, and she steps on my face.
Oh,
I was like
yeah.
5. We've had those stories, right? And the reality is, hey, let go. She'll come back. Just don't try to force her into something where she's scared. Right. At the same point, trying to break like a yearling heifer to lead, and she's headstrong and she's like, no, I'm going to fight. Do you fight with her, or do you just say, hey, we'll go where you want to go? Eventually you'll trust me, and then we'll end up going where we both want to go. And that simple lesson, when you think about the time working with cows and how often do we get frustrated, and I've been there plenty of times. Slow down, you relax. And here's the thing that, it's as much hitting me as I've always understood. Too often we go into working with animals and we don't take the time to build trust. And the reality is that when it comes to people, it's the same thing. But do we take the time to develop trust? And, there's a different paradigm in regards to trust. There can be the type of people, I trust everyone. I have a trust level of 10 out of 10 for everyone. And then over time, things happen and maybe it drops to a 9, but regain the trust. Or there's the type of people that trust is at a 0. And you have to work so hard and so long. And maybe over time, you can work the way up. This is what I've learned from mentors. One, you'll end up having a lot of success with people. The other one, you'll constantly be miserable. The perception is if you're constantly trusting, people are going to take advantage of you. As I've learned and I've seen, no, it really doesn't work out always like that. Sure, it will happen, but you can have safeguards. But if you have this level of, I'm never going to trust anyone, it's a cold, hard, miserable life. And I've lived there in parts, and part of it not knowing any better and understanding, there's a better way. Or why do we have such low trust on others? And I think that's often a reflection of ourselves and the work that we've done in ourselves, and or understanding why we have that opinion and feeling. And what I found in myself is that low level of trust that I had was more an indictment on what I was afraid of, what I was, what the fears and insecurities that I had. Were people going to value me? Did I have worth? Am I good enough? And all of those things that I realized over time, that created a barrier between myself and others to be able to build that relationship, that trusting, connected relationship that would ultimately lead to business success with clients or just relationship success, period. And so if I go back to, again, working with cows, and you stop and think about it, it's like, man, when they trust you, you trust them, you can go anywhere. I mean, talk about horses, talk about cows, it doesn't matter, animals. And people are no different, but yet we often lose sight of it because we don't even think about it.
Get your Sealpro silage barrier film today. Protect the seed, fertilizer, labor, and expensive inputs that you've invested in. Choose best-in-class Sealpro now in 3 different versions: traditional 2-roll application, our new co-rolled application, and super simple and wildly successful 1-layer film, Sealpro 1. It's easy to buy, easy to use. Contractor covering? We'll work with them. Learn more at sealprosilage.com. That's SEALPRO silage.com. Family owned and operated for over 25 years. 559-779-5961. That's 559-779-5961. Well, you have a new book coming out, Tyler, called The Things That We Hide. And I'm very intrigued by that title. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. The tagline below it, what you hide controls you, what you face transforms you. The reality is, as I mentioned, the different stories, whether it's the trust scale, whether it's personal, stories of family experiences, we all have something we hide.
Right.
And oftentimes that hide, we're afraid of the perception of others. Oftentimes in business and leadership, if they figure out and realize I have no idea what I'm doing, then they're going to think a lot less of me. And so what we end up doing is we present ourselves in either a leadership or performance way to hide those things.
Right.
Hey, if I tell them everything I know, then they won't figure out what I don't know. If I just work so hard and push so much and get results, then they won't understand that, man, I'm not very good at this. If I just kind of, if I'm kind of a jerk and, have those, grinder type mentalities, then all of a sudden, people won't question what I'm doing in business. And what I found is through myself and others, those reactions, the things we hide. For me, it was a story, and I don't know if you ever knew this, that when I was 14, I had a younger brother die in a farming accident. I could sit here and say that we knew each other. I knew your husband, Ron. We worked together for years and probably never knew that. It doesn't matter. But then in a relationship point of view, working with someone, understanding, oh, wow, man, I have a greater appreciation for them because of the things they've gone through. And we've all gone through something. As you shared with me about your family, we all go through something. And we can either choose to hide it. And when we hide it, it'll control us. Because we start to act differently. We choose not to be authentic and vulnerable because we're constantly hiding. But then when we can choose to face it and say, hey, I'm just trying to figure it out, but I'm willing to do the work. That authenticity, people are like, oh, great, I'm the same. And all of a sudden you find out that connections and relationships get so much easier. And so for me, it was the moment of understanding after years and years and years of just hiding that away. And it isn't that I avoided it and try to do, shamefully. It was just I never thought it was relevant. In the story in and of how my brother died and that circumstance, it is what it is. We all have things, but it's how I responded to it. That's what was really the difference maker. And I responded with intensity. I just put my head down and push.
Right.
And as I can sit here, and there's probably people listening that probably have known me over the years. And I think it's pretty easy for a lot of people right off the clip say, yep, he's intense. That was a armor. That was a guard. That was me. No, intense quality to me. But when that's all I'm known for, what ends up happening is you're just a bulldozer.
Right.
And you just leave carnage in relationships instead of saying, hey, let's slow down and figure out, can we be in this together? It's like that leading the heifer. If I'm trying to drag her everywhere, as I did with plenty of effort, and it doesn't work, and you can fight them, but then when you just relax and say, hey, we can just go together. We'll get there when we get there, and then you trust me, and then it'll be a whole lot smoother. I had to learn that, and I had to kind of put windows in the wall of my intensity so people could see the real me, and I could see them, in order to develop that trust, in order to develop those relationships, to actively, effectively lead and impact people.
Well, your involvement in the leadership industry, tell me about that and what it is that you do and what makes you tick.
I've really become a student of the industry. I've enjoyed coaching. I coached Dairy Bowl in California going back when I was 20 couple years old, to coaching my kids' sports, other sports, and I've really enjoyed that. And what I found as I was growing and developing my leadership acumen and sitting at the feet of some pretty amazing mentors, I realized if I would have been doing this stuff the whole time along when I was doing my nutrition business, it would have been a whole lot more fun because that was my job. I thought my job was to, create diets for cows. It was never my job. So now what I do is I have a community called the Roundtable. It's a cohort-based group where we'll meet weekly on Zoom and kind of help people walk through these same things I've had to walk through. I also host an event called the Impact Driven Leader Summit.
Yeah, that's coming up, right?
That's coming up May 7th and 8th in Spokane, Washington. Have some amazing speakers that I've gotten to know through my podcast that are coming to present. And then as well, I do some keynote speaking. I've had the pleasure of speaking for several agricultural companies, which I love and enjoy to be able to bring back to the industry that maybe doesn't get the perspective of leadership development and training that the other industries that I've been a part of, whether it's network marketing, whether it's just overall business, executive business stuff. And that's what I love to bring back to agriculture, because too often people think, oh, agriculture is a different business. And if there's people everywhere, it's the same. And it's, can you see through the differences to see the similarities? I think that's the biggest challenge for people at times. And agriculture does have one component that maybe a couple other industries in our world do. I think medical has it. I think some of the first responders had it. It's a pretty emotional tie. Agriculture is a very emotional business. It's a longer generational thing. There's emotions tied to it, which make it kind of difficult at times as a leader. but also then as an employee. So often it's like, hey, the owner of the farm, like they care way more about the cows, the business, everything else than maybe some of the employees. And it's their job sometimes like, hey, how to help them connect with it as opposed to be frustrated that they don't. But that's the things that I do now today. And as well, like I mentioned earlier, an author writing a book to kind of share some of my journey and some of the things that I've had to figure out the hard way.
I was on your website earlier today, and that's tylerdickerhoof.com, correct?
Yeah.
And you do have a lot of resources on there, a lot of things, a lot of ways for people to get involved in learning more about leadership styles and just learning how to live.
There's an element of that is, so often people think, oh, I'm not a leader. We all are, because we got to lead ourselves. And, one of the first major roles, or not first major roles, but one of the biggest roles of leading is being a parent. And that is one of the things that I've seen and experienced. The better I've become as a leader of leading myself, it gives me the opportunity to lead better for my family and my community and those around me, much less having nothing to do with my business. But all of those things, you start to practice it everywhere, it can be applied everywhere.
So that leads into how to become an effective leader and how to evaluate yourself. Tell me about that.
I think that was the biggest kind of aha moment. I mentioned earlier about intensity being a barrier that I recognized in my ability to lead, to really work with, to get the most out of what I had as a skill set to support others. And I think that's first and foremost is understanding for people that we all have these barriers. We all have these walls that we put up. And for me, it was realizing that, oh, I have them, and so does everyone else. And these fears and insecurities, as I call them, and understand they create these walls. I mentioned intensity. I believe insensitivity is another one. Isolation, where you just kind of disappear, check out. Inactivity is, oh, I know what to do, but I don't want to do it. I know I need to go talk to that client about a past due bill, collection. I don't want to do it, right? Connor, you understand, right?
Yeah, I get that one. Yeah.
Yep. And it's choosing it. It'll take care of itself. Because often what I find is when we result to those walls, it's a response to a previous fear instance. I bring up my brother, intent, oh, that worked. And I believe that where most things go wrong in leadership isn't our strategies, isn't our tactics, isn't the frameworks of working with people per se. It's how do we show up and how do they as well. And if we can't grasp how we're showing up to others, what's it like to work with me? What's it like to sit across the table from me? And that is one of the most imperative things a leader can do is start to investigate that themselves from their perspective, but then have the wherewithal to ask someone else. Grew up on a dairy farm, but most of my industry in the dairy industry has been a service provider. And that's a very hard role, especially when farmers are the end of every stick, meaning they got to take every price, they give every price, and it's a hard role. But I also would encourage whether you're owner of an operation or managing a dairy, it's like, hey, being across the table isn't a bucket of roses either.
Right.
And the ability to have that relationship back and forth is like, what's it like to work with me, both as a service provider, but also as an operational owner? And the more that you can foster that, the more you can develop and understand, hey, what's it like to work with me? What's it like to be around me? When you're doing that with a service provider, guess what? Your herdsman, your field manager, whoever it may be, they're people too. And they have to go through that same experience. So the opportunity to say, okay, what's it like to work with me? How do I recognize how I show up when my fears and insecurities, I get challenged on, hey, how are we going to do? What are we going to do? Financial parts of it, all of those pieces. How do you respond? And when you start to understand how you respond, you can start to take inventory and instead of fighting it, own it. I choose to not want to make a decision. I get a little insensitive, show up and do the job, right? Instead of complaining, just show up and do what I told you instead of saying, all right, where's the breakdown here? What don't you understand? And being able to own not only ourselves, but then to see someone else's response to where you ask them to do a job. And all of a sudden, they come back and they're intense, or you ask them to do a job. Oh, yeah. And they never did. Well, there's a reason why. They were afraid of being held accountable. They were afraid of doing it wrong. They, maybe it wasn't a priority. Well, all those are responses that if you can help, you can start to understand, then you can start to influence people better.
But I think you have to understand yourself first, right? Find that sweet spot of where you belong.
Yeah, it's understanding yourself, because and I heard this yesterday, I believe this too. Whatever issue you have in your operation, if you're the leader, it's you. You are the bottleneck. You are the problem. You are the reason. And being able to accept that, and no matter, it's coming back to, hey, Connie, if you were the one to wake up and make coffee this morning and it wasn't like you wanted it, well, whose fault is it? You. It's not anyone else's. And it's just being able to take that responsibility. That's not blame, but that's just saying, oh, I have agency to control that. I have agency to do something different, instead of, oh, that's just the way it is. And I think when we take that responsibility as an individual first, then we can start to see how we can impact others to help them through that same process. Right. But it takes the awareness to say that, oh, I'm showing up in a way, I'm responding in a way that is either enhancing or making relationships difficult. That's something I have to own. I can't put that on anyone else. I have to own it. And once you do that, then you can start changing your mindset. Then you can start, working through those things. Why is it difficult? Could be a personality. Okay, great. But if there's a mutual desire, then you can get to a common ground.
And I like the way that you have paralleled this to a herd owner or a herd manager or somebody in the service industry. Yeah, the perception of other people is so important, I think, as to how we relate to each other, and realizing that other people have these kinds of insecurities or intensities or whatever. And trying to get to know it. I've always thought it would be really great if we could wear a little Post-it note on our forehead that said, "Hi, I'm intense. This is how you should work with me."
Well, and here's the piece of that is, once you start to understand, and in my process of understanding, I see intense people from a mile away because I can be intense. But I also can understand, like, the lights here shining in my office, so to kind of block out the sun that's coming in. If those lights are off, then you can't see me. Right. But if I turn on those lights in your bedroom 3 a.m, no one wants it. So there's a time and place. There's a time and place to, kind of choose, all right, how do I address this situation? Do I need to be actively engaged, or do I need to slow down and let things play out? There's a place for that. But when your default is, I don't want to do the difficult thing because I'm afraid of how it's going to turn out, the rejection, one thing that I've learned now through coaching, hundreds of people, we all have fears and insecurities. That's the first and foremost.
Right.
If you're living and breathing, you have them. Yeah. Welcome to the club. Number 2 is resoundingly, I haven't really found a different response. And it comes down to, am I enough? Do I have value? And when our response stems from always defending that, am I enough? Do I have value? And that's in personal relation, marriages, kids, that is to work relationships. And then when, for me, I describe it as the 4 walls: the intensity, inactivity, isolation, and insensitivity. When I can start to recognize when I do that myself, and I can start to see that response in others, I know it's a response to their insecurity. And that gives me a clue to say, oh, okay, I need to ask more questions. I need to choose to be fascinated rather than frustrated. Because when I can recognize when that happens in me, when I get challenged, when I have a difficult conversation situation, and my insecurity starts to show, whether through intensity, one of those ways, I need to take a step back. So, oh, okay, I got to own this. I got to figure out why. And when I can see it from someone else, it's like, okay, now I can start to infer. I don't know what their insecurities are, but I know they have them, because that's a response to it. And then you can start to work through those instances to create a better relationship. I call, the tool to do that is empathy. And most people are confused, and even they think about like, oh, empathy, that's what a lot of, people talk about now. It's a hard word to understand, in my opinion. And I hear all these different definitions. I'm like, it just doesn't make sense. How can I put myself in your shoes? My feet aren't going to fit. And if your feet are in there, it's really going to hurt. I can't take your eyes out and put them in my eyes. It physically doesn't work. But this is what I can do. I can figuratively or literally put my arm around you and walk with you. When I put my arm around you and walk with you, I'm a person of faith. And I think there's an element of this. Don't be unequally yoked. All right. If I pull you, it's not going to work. If you pull me, it's not going to work. So we have to find a pace at which we can both go together. Mm-hmm. Here's another key component. When I put my arm around you, I expose myself. It takes vulnerability. Mm-hmm. You can't have connection without vulnerability. You can't have connection without saying, I need you. If we were to go at any dairy farm in the country today and say, hey, is there someone here that you don't need? Okay, maybe, employee, whatever. If you tell them all to go home, are you going to be able to do your job? And I even love it. And this is so much the dairy industry and something I had to learn. People are like, I want to milk cows so I don't have to work with people. Yeah, sorry, it doesn't work like that. You're going to have to work with someone at some point, sometime.
Right.
And so just embrace it.
Right.
And if there's ever a point in your day in life that you don't need to interact and work with other people, most likely you're dead. Plain and simple. Mm-hmm. And so understanding and appreciating, it's like, yeah, I have to be vulnerable to connect and work with people. That's a requirement of it. And it's going to enhance that relationship as opposed to thinking it's going to make it worse.
Right.
And these are all things that I didn't do well. I didn't do well at all. I paid the price. It was, challenging. The relationships, always a little strained, always a little difficult. And finally got to a point, it's like, I got to figure out why this is. What is it? And that was the growth process to understand, oh, my intensity is a problem. My insecurities, my fears of, do I have value? Am I enough? Can I actually, show up to a dairy and add value to them? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that constant struggle trying to figure it out made me show up in ways that was hard to work with.
Thanks for telling your story. I really appreciate it. I want to ask about your book. It's coming out
June 9th.
June 9th. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah, we
That's
had a
Ron's
little bit
birthday.
of delay. Oh, it is.
Yeah,
Well, spectacular.
Happy birthday. So how can people get your book? Will it be on your website?
So right now we're in the pre-order process. You can go to my website or go to thethingswehidebook.com. You can pre-order it there within a matter of a few days. We're just waiting on the publisher to get it finished. You will be able to buy it at Amazon, Books A Million, any of those major retailer places. If you do buy pre-order through my website, you pre-order through one of those. There's also a few extras where you can get a master class that I've done. There's an excerpt of the book that you can read a portion of it before it comes out. Mm-hmm. So all those things are available if you go to thethingswehidebook.com.
And your website again is?
TylerDickerhoof.com. You can learn more about my roundtable program, my annual summit, and as well, there's information about the book there.
Thank you so much for being on our Dairy Voice podcast. I think this is really important. Like I said, we talk a lot about a lot of different things on dairies, but we don't talk enough about the personal development that needs to happen so that people can be in the dairy industry and enjoy it and live it and do their very best.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably a facet. If I think back of, the classes that I wish I would have had more of when I was in school.
Yeah.
And one of the classes that I'm so grateful that I had a roundabout way of getting to, and sometimes you fail a class and it forces you into another class, the greatest thing you ever learned, which was interpersonal communication.
Right.
And that is learning how to read people and what people aren't saying and they're really saying. And I think that's a big piece of all of this is it's helped me understand, I can actually start to determine how I show up and how other people read me. But those are things that we use every day outside of agriculture. Mm-hmm. And maybe they might have some sales training when you're trying to do sales. But when you're thinking about I'm leading a dairy and operation with 30, 40, 50, 150 employees, man, how you show up as a leader dramatically impacts that business.
Right.
And, the ability that, it's an industry that needs leadership development. And it's how much are we going out to get it? And I'd love to be a conduit to bring what I've learned from the masters such as John Maxwell, who I've been able to sit at his feet and bring back, because it's all people. We may care about four-legged animals, but it's all people.
Thank you so much, Tyler, for joining us today on the Dairy Voice podcast by Dairy Business News. We really appreciate you being here. You know, we talk a lot about dairy management, record keeping. Dairy Voice, I know other hosts talk about showing cattle and breeding and genetics, but we also need to address these personal and interpersonal relationships that we have with each other. And that really is what makes our business flourish, is being able to understand our own leadership styles, knowing who other people are and how we can best all work together. Like Tyler said, it all comes down to people. Our cows can teach us a lot about how we deal with other people. My name is Connie Kuber. I'm with Sealpro Silage Barrier Films by Connor AgriScience. And as we head out to do some more spring planting and perhaps some hay baling, chopping, that kind of thing, please stay safe out there in the field. And we will talk to you again very soon.